Well, good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans, and welcome in to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7 365 comprehensive home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks, coming back at you folks after a off night last night and on Sunday, and we welcome you folks back here to the Sparks 365 Network here on the 9th of 12 recaps. Tonight, recapping the 2014 season for your Los Angeles Sparks, alongside Chris and Mancy, once again via Apple's FaceTime from the Anaheim Studios in Anaheim, California. Kyle McClure joining you folks here from Studio 171 in San Diego. Chris, good evening, man. And, well, good news and bad news. Good news is we got you in the Hangout before the show. The bad news, you apparently had no audio feed into the Hangout, so we're doing it again via FaceTime. So, it appears you're making some progress, but not enough right now going on. So then, how's it going tonight?
Good. Nah.
No idea, huh? Nothing to say?
Nah.
We are still working, folks. We're trying to get these pretty gnarly difficulties out of our way here and into our rear view mirror. Well, Chris, the night has ultimately come for us here to recap the 2014 season for like the third or fourth time we're going to do it here about the LA Sparks, Chris. As we know, man, a very, very poor season for a founding member of the WNBA again. As we know, Chris, marred by off-season rumors and everything included about the team leaving and going to the Bay Area, or the team folding and perhaps the league folding soon after that, Chris. The Sparks, with a lot of expectations, a lot of pressure on this ball club. They finished at 16-18, finished in fourth place in the WNBA Western Conference, and then got annihilated in 2 games by the Phoenix Mercury in the first round. Now, Chris, we'll get to the obvious news for the Sparks over the past season, of course, is when Magic Johnson and Mark Walter, on February 5th, after 35 days of complete silence from the WNBA, Chris, they finally came forward and saved this franchise from contraction or relocation or implosion after the previous ownership group had left, Chris. And I know, man, that it was tough for everybody, not just Sparks fans, Chris, but also, Chris, I think it was tough for fans across the league to sort of, digest what was going on, that, a marquee franchise that has been with this league since day one would be put up for sale and ultimately could have left LA or could have folded, and Chris, everyone else knew that perhaps if LA folded or left, that perhaps the league would have went underground too, Chris. I know, man, that it weighs heavy on us too, at least with the offseason, of course, with our combined effort, but more so your effort combinedly here to get us on the map here, man. But again, knowing about what happened, Chris, again, we know that it was a very rugged season for the Sparks, but again, how much of a role, though, man, did the offseason sort of play into the Sparks' pretty bad record in play all season?
I think pretty much huge. I think since they were just thinking of what gone on the offseason, didn't know if they were going to fold or move, relocate to the Bay Area, just went gone with the owners leaving, and I think plagued them all season long, didn't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Chris, I think, man, that regardless if it was game one or last, Chris, I think that all the way through the season, everybody, players, staff, executives, fans, writers, and media members, Chris, would say that, the Sparks sort of did a complete 180 from how they were just so good and so dominant in 2013, where, again, man, we sort of saw that, that this team was under scrutiny and under pressure daily to play at such an elite tier because of Magic Johnson bringing that old Showtime Laker mentality of, you have to win the title or the fans are going to hate your guts, Chris. And again, I think that Chris, that this team, unfortunately, man, they crumpled under pressure. I think that after the offseason expectations of, the Hollywood ending basically of how Magic saved the team from moving or folding, and things never got off on the right foot after game one, or after game two, at least after finishing May 2-1, Chris. The team never was above 500 after May. Things just did not seem to click, Chris. And as we go to Magic Johnson, Chris, again, man, we know that Magic is a LA icon, an NBA icon, and a pretty much, Chris, a ray of hope for people that suffer or have had people that they know that have suffered or died from HIV and AIDS, Chris. And he is, a LA and NBA icon, Chris. But again, I did ask Candace Parker, Chris, when I interviewed her 2 weeks ago, and I did ask her, what it meant to her and her teammates, Chris, to have the backing of Magic and Mark and everyone that bought the franchise, Chris. She said that it was good, though, that the team had owners that have been a part of championship organizations. We know about Magic winning 5 titles with the Lakers as a player. Stan Kasten won a few titles as well in his time, as did Mark Walter, Chris. So she was more relieved, Chris, that it was an ownership that had the money, but also had the championship experience and championship mentality to bring to this franchise. Again, Chris, so we know that it has the most wins in league history, the longest winning streak, and of course the 2 titles, Chris. Again, knowing about the ownership, Chris, do you think, though, that with that ownership, again, that not this year, Chris, but sort of in the future, that the Sparks can regain that championship pedigree that they did have in 01 and 02, again, knowing again that their owners, Chris, again, have been where the Sparks want to go, and that is to the finals of the league and play for the championship in the future?
Yeah, I think probably in the future, the Sparks will get to the finals and win it, just like they did back in 01 and 02, since Magic Johnson is the owner, and with that championship mentality, and gonna get the Sparks back where they were.
Now, Chris, I was chatting today with Albert Lee for a bit, as Albert had just left his office, and he was scheduling some more guests for us for the program tomorrow and Wednesday. We'll get to those folks later on in the show. But Chris, he told me, though, that as we know that Guggenheim Partners, who Magic is affiliated with Mark Walter, that apparently what I did catch, though, and I think Albert told me this, but I forgot, though, that their ownership is sort of that the group of Magic, Mark, and then Guggenheim Partners is looking into investing in the Brooklyn Nets. And Albert thought that perhaps that maybe Magic would move the Sparks out of Los Angeles because he is also trying to own an NBA franchise. Now, Chris, Magic said, though, that that's not going to happen. He wants to keep the Sparks in Los Angeles. But, Chris, as I know very well, though, that Magic has always wanted to own an NBA franchise. And, Chris, unfortunately, the Lakers are pretty much closed right now because that's going to be in the Buss family until Jeannie and Jim both die as well in the future. But, Chris, again, knowing, though, man, that Magic is in charge here of the Sparks, Chris, and again that we know about, or at least that we've heard about, that there's talk, though, that Magic is trying to look into investing, I believe, into the Brooklyn Nets, Chris. It would suck, though, Chris, but do you believe, though, that perhaps Magic might move the Sparks himself out of L.A. to Brooklyn because of the media market, and also if he does, in fact, invest and sometime soon own an NBA franchise, and if it is in Brooklyn, man?
Maybe, perhaps, but we shall see, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think, Chris, I don't think that Magic would dupe the LA fans, especially, Chris, I mean, in a city, Chris, where he's basically basketball god in LA, Chris. I doubt that he would move an LA franchise because he had other interests than Chris, so I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Well, Chris, as we all know, there is the one player that we must talk about, and it's not Nneka Ogwumike in your view, Chris, or your other girl, Lindsey Harding, Chris. It is the face of the franchise. It is Candace Parker, Chris. As we know, man, not the same season for Candace, Chris. Again, battling a few minor injuries, a bad knee, a few dislocated fingers, a wrist problem, a few things included, Chris. But again, still went out there, man, and still proved herself as one of the elite players in the game. Again, didn't win MVP, but again, Chris, I think, though, okay, she may have took a bit of a small nosedive, Chris, but again, when you're the only player playing in all 34 games, basically, and you take one game off and your team almost wins by 2, you take another game off and your team wins by 4, Chris. But Chris, in most of those losses, though, she's the main player every game, Chris. I know it's probably a burden for her, man, but she loves having the burden of that on her shoulders, Chris, and being that player, man. But again, Chris, reassessing her season, okay, not the best of years probably from her, Chris. Maybe not as bad as it was when she was injured in 2010 and part of 2011. But Chris, what did you see though from Candace other than her being the lone player to show up every night in the starting 5 for LA this year?
Just try to give her all her best for the team, trying to get them to past the first round of the playoffs, trying to get them to the WNBA finals and everything, but just everyone else didn't show up and help her out.
Which is the case every game of the season, basically. Now, folks, also a quick update courtesy of Candace. She is back on the floor on a limited basis and did go through a quick training session early in the afternoon today at a local gym. We will have the video for you folks on the network Twitter handle coming up after the show ends, courtesy of our IG account. But Chris, I think where the white flag was thrown for the Sparks this year, the surrender flag went up, Chris, was July 21st when it was broken by Michelle Volpel and Sue Favor that the Sparks had blew out head coach Carol Ross after that last loss to the Mystics back on July 17th after the All-Star break had started. Chris, I think that was the point in time where it was like, how much worse can it get basically for the Sparks? And of course, Chris, it almost got worse because, again, you named Penny Toller, the executive vice president and GM of the club, as the head coach. Now, Chris, Penny, though, did go 6-6 and did get the team into the postseason. But again, man, it was not the same sort of feel of that. But Chris, again, as you go back and revisit July 21st, Chris, when you got the news or you heard from me or heard from the network about the Sparks firing Carol Ross, what was your initial thought, reaction, and your thought process as you try to digest that the Sparks had just blew up their head coach after a mediocre start to the first half of the season?
Just very shocked, and everything that Sparks fire head coach Carol Ross.
And Chris, like I said, though, I believe, though, that was like, the white flag went up, I think, at Staples Center, Chris. That was the point in time where they said, we've had enough. We're going to make a move here. We're going to see how good Penny does. And Chris, now as you go from Ross, Chris, to Penny Toller. Okay, now Penny, not much of a coach, Chris. As we know, she's been the longest tenured GM in the WNBA, man. But again, for not having any coaching experience, Chris, as I know that I ranted and raved on here on July 21st when I was solo here for that hour-long show, Chris, is for her not having any experience coaching, Chris, she proved everybody wrong that you don't have to have coaching experience or a coaching pedigree to have success. And she went 6-6, Chris. The Sparks clinched their 14th WNBA playoff berth, which is the most in league history. But again, an early exit again because you knew they were going to lose to the Mercury. At least I knew they would. I know you didn't think so. But Chris, but again, Chris, how did you think, though, that Penny Toller did again, Chris? No, again, she had no experience beforehand basically coaching at any level, Chris. And, hey, 500, 2, and then, 0-2, unfortunately, in the playoffs. But again, Chris, no coaching experience, Chris. But, hey, got them where they wanted to go. That was the playoffs. How do you think she did?
I think she did pretty good. No experience coaching and got them, 500 coaching, and I think she did a pretty much good job.
Now, Chris, that takes me to the biggest talking point that a lot of the Sparks fans are wondering about is the Sparks coaching staff. Now, folks, I have not been in touch with my little birdie in the front office lately, folks. But what I can recall for you folks is this is a independent coaching search done by Magic Johnson. So, Chris, Magic Johnson is going to be naming the next Sparks head coach here. Now, Chris, last news I got from my little birdie in the front office, Chris, he told me that it's a list of about 12 international coaches. And folks, in case you're wondering, Olaf Lang, Sandy Brondello's husband, and Parker's coach, Nick Kanningberg, is not on the list. But, Chris, there's about a group of 12 coaches that Johnson has already sat down and interviewed, Chris. Now, again, you did bring up, though, about Coach Dave Miller, Chris. I think he's on my radar, at least, because we know about his great IQ and how he is on Sportsnet, Chris. But, Chris, okay, man, we know that Magic is leaving Parker in control of the roster. Chris, are you at all shocked, though, man, that there's about 12 different coaches that have great coaching pedigrees overseas that have already called Magic and said, I want to coach your ball club? Is that pretty good to know that, considering that the Sparks have gone through 2 coaches this year, man, that there's already 12 other candidates waiting in line to get the job?
Yeah.
Always good when there's backup, but again, folks, we will expect to hear more about the coaching change once the season comes around. Now, Chris, again, man, the Sparks finishing at 16-18 in 4th place in the WNBA Western Conference, and again, completely demoralized by the Mercury in the first round in a quick 2-game sweep that culminated with a pretty much a whitewashing at Staples Center. Now, Chris, as we look ahead to 2015, man, the Sparks have already begun pushing fans to get their season tickets and stuff like that, man. Nothing wrong with that, though. But again, Chris, as we look ahead, man, okay, 2 names real quick, dude. Jennifer Hampson and Anita Slaughter, 2 players that will be in training camp next year for the Sparks, Chris. Looking ahead briefly to 2015, Chris, what are your expectations for the Sparks going forward towards 2015?
I think probably a great season, probably next season. With a new coach, wherever that might be. Then already a season under, knowing they're in Los Angeles, the owner, Magic Johnson, and I think they should be back normal and everything.
Chris, I don't think they're going to be number 1 seeds. So don't even start with that nonsense already, dude, because we're not getting there yet. There'll be 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, but they're not going to be number 1 anytime soon, unfortunately. Chris, I think going forward, man, is we should mention as well, Chris, that we have to find out who's going to be the new team president. Vince Malcolm has already announced he's going to be resigning after the season ends, Chris, so there's another person to go get it to in the front office. But, Chris, I look at it this way, man, is, yes, 1 year is, okay, as we said, man, this is sort of the freebie year again where the Sparks didn't know whether they were going to be in L.A. or the players were going to be with other opposing franchises. And that would have been weird to see Parker and Taurasi playing with Phoenix, perhaps, or if Parker was over there in Connecticut, perhaps. So who knows what would have happened there. But, Chris, again, man, I think we just have to pretty much just sit down and wait, basically. You know, kind of wait a little bit until the time rolls around. But, again, I think, man, new coach, new chapter in Sparks history begins when the draft begins next season. So, again, folks, the Sparks finished the year at 16-18 and, again, in 4th place in the WNBA Western Conference for getting trounced by the Mercury in the first round of the playoffs. Now, folks, a quick update for you folks, as we know that we've had a few different WNBA writers joining us, folks. We have been informed that we will have 2 more joining us tomorrow and Thursday, according to what we have been gathering from Albert Lee. We have, actually, folks, scratch that. We actually have one coming up for the Mercury. Chris Habis, who writes for the Phoenix Mercury, will join us on Friday to recap the season for the Mercury. And also joining us on tomorrow night is James Bowman from SwishBill.com will join us, folks. And now, folks, a quick update for you folks here. So again, folks, the remaining schedule, by the way, for our recap shows is Atlanta tomorrow night, Minnesota Thursday, and Phoenix on Friday. Now, folks, a quick heads up here, folks. James Bowman will join us tomorrow night, folks. But with that, we will be having the show tomorrow at 8 o'clock p.m. because James cannot be up at 1 a.m. because he has to get up super early to go cover a few things for the Hawks and the Dream for the Hawks tomorrow. So, folks, again, it'll be 8 o'clock p.m. showtime tomorrow. We'll be joined by SwishBill.com writer James Bowman. Then on Friday, Chris Habis, who writes for the Phoenix Mercury, will join us on Friday to recap the champion season on Friday night. And that will be back here at 10 o'clock on the network. So, again, folks, James Bowman tomorrow. We are waiting a writer from the Lynx to join us on Thursday, and then Chris Habis will join us on Friday to talk Phoenix Mercury. So, Chris, you can enjoy tomorrow night off and also enjoy your night off on Friday because I know you do not want to be talking about the purple and orange on Friday, which would be the Phoenix Mercury. So, again, folks, James Bowman, one of our great friends. That's a great writer on SwishBill.com, folks, and, of course, one of the guys that helped out with the petition. James Bowman from SwishBill.com talking Dream Basketball tomorrow night. Awaiting a writer from the Lynx on Thursday, and Chris Habis will join us on Friday to talk about the 2014 WNBA champion Phoenix Mercury. Now, folks, also another update on Friday morning, just coming into me at about 4 o'clock today, folks. We will have another edition of down here. Friday morning in San Diego again, 11:30 a.m. We will be joined on Cal's Corner by LA Sparks guard and a 2011 WNBA champion and San Diego resident Candace Wiggins will join us on Friday morning, 11:30 a.m. on Cal's Corner, which will be posted on Mixcloud and Spreaker later in the afternoon. So again, folks, to recap again our rundown here. So again, tomorrow, James Bowman from SwishBill.com covering the Atlanta Dream will join us tomorrow night on Wednesday. The Lynx on Thursday, and Chris Habis from SwishBill.com will join us on Friday to talk about the 2014 WNBA champion Phoenix Mercury. And again, folks, on Friday morning beforehand, 11:30 a.m., Candace Wiggins, LA Sparks guard, and a member of a 2011 WNBA champion Minnesota Lynx will join us on Friday morning at 11:30 a.m. on Cal's Corner. Well, Chris, as we get ready, man, to look ahead real quick, man, as we do in the last part of the show with Chris again, the Atlanta Dream, Chris, coming off of a 19-15 season. A year, man, after coming off of another loss in the finals, they get swept by the underdog Chicago Sky, Chris. But again, man, it was a good year, though, for the Dream. And, of course, Chris, our boy, Michael Cooper, coaching down there in Hotlanta, man, led them to a great season last year. Chris, your thoughts real quick about the Dream as we get ready to close out here for the night, about 5 minutes here, Chris. Again, a good season. But again, man, just the postseason woes continue down there for Atlanta. What did you gather, and what do you take away from the Dream season? We get ready to look ahead to them tomorrow night.
Great season by the Atlanta Dream with the #1 seed and everything, but just got eliminated in the first round. But just a great season all around.
So again, folks, recapping our rundown here again, we will have Atlanta tomorrow night. James Bowman, SwitchAppeal.com writer from Peachtree Hoops, will join us tomorrow night at 8 o'clock p.m. PAC, 11 o'clock Eastern. Then on Thursday will be the Minnesota Lynx, and then, of course, on Friday, the last team, of course, the defending WNBA champs, the Phoenix Mercury. We'll be joined by Chris Habas from SwitchAppeal.com to join us here as well. Chris, I know that we won't be able to get your take tomorrow, so we'll just get your take here for the last two teams here. Chris, the Lynx this year, man, not the same sort of season. Again, a lot of injuries marred this year. But again, Chris, they did, though, were saved basically by Maya Moore, who won the WNBA MVP award. But of course, Chris, that rare second-round exit this year to the Mercury, Chris. Again, man, it was more so just the injury problems for the Lynx, Chris. Do you, though, believe, man, that you can sort of pin the tail on the Lynx season with the injury bugs early in the year because they lost a lot of their key players early in the season, and they just weren't the same during the course of the year?
Yeah, I think very much with the injury bugs earlier in the season, I think the Lynx weren't the same. Yeah,
the only problem, Chris, there was injuries, but the injuries were to all their big puzzle pieces. And, of course, Chris, whether you like it or not, dude, I'm going to have to ask you this, man. But, again, it was a record-shattering season. 16 consecutive wins, 29 regular season wins, and sweeping their basically beating everybody in sight, and only lost one home game all year, folks, to a triumphant finish, folks, with the Phoenix Mercury winning the 2014 WNBA title in a 3-game sweep of the Chicago Sky. Chris, I'll tell you what, man, a lot of people have been saying that this could be the modern era Comets, Chris, and I think that they could be right because what we saw this year, Chris, probably will never be duplicated again, man, how they rattled off 16 straight, 29 wins, man. I mean, Chris, in all fairness, man, this probably will never be a season we will ever see again where it was just complete domination, man. And there was no flaws. There was no errors in the Mercury's game, Chris, between Diana Taurasi and everyone else and Brittany Griner, Chris. 29-5, Chris, can pretty much speak volumes for how good of a season it was, Chris. How do you sort of try to sum up a 2014 Mercury season in a nutshell?
Just unbelievable season by the Mercury, winning just 16 straight, losing only one game at home all season to the San Antonio Stars, and just unbelievable season.
Honestly, Chris, I don't think it'll be a season that will ever be duplicated anytime soon in the future. But again, folks, to recap our schedule, tomorrow, the Atlanta Dream, and I will be joined by James Bowman from SwitchAppeal.com and Peachtree Hoops. Thursday, we'll be talking Minnesota Lynx, and then on Friday, the 2014 WNBA champion Phoenix Mercury with Chris Habas from SwitchAppeal.com, covering the Merc down there in the desert. And also, folks, again, a quick update as well here. I will be having another pre-recorded interview on Friday morning. Again, I'll be joined by Candace Wiggins, my local San Diego resident, here again at 11:30 a.m. on Friday. We will, of course, post the link to the interview, of course, on later on in the day. But with that, Chris, as we do call it a night, man, your last thoughts on the Sparks season and any thoughts you want to get out real quick about another interview I'm going to be doing on Friday morning with Candace Wiggins. What do you got to say? Last thoughts on the Sparks season, and also, man, any sort of thoughts about another interview I get to do on Friday morning?
Just up and down season by the Sparks. Just gonna get back to 500. Just didn't look like they were the Sparks that we know that they got in off season, and just give it another crazy Friday again.
So again, folks, to recap the Sparks season again, folks, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of turmoil, a lot of turbulence and distractions and disturbance, I should say. A lot of noise, actually, around this LA team. Again, a very rugged and cloudy season. But again, the Sparks, again, get their 14th WNBA playoff berth, the most all-time in league history. But again, succumb to the eventual champion Mercury in the first round. And again, folks, a reminder again, but on Friday morning, 11:30 a.m., Candace Wiggins from San Diego, California, will be my guest on Cal's Corner again, 11:30 a.m. Pre-recorded and will be posted later in the day. But with that, folks, we'll call it a night here until tomorrow night. Again, folks, with James Bowman joining us here in place of Chris tomorrow night. Have a safe night. Drive safely on overcoming. And good night now. This has been the LA Sparks 365 Network. We are Sparks. We are LA, and we are the WNBA. See you folks back here tomorrow night with James Bowman joining us here to talk Atlanta Dream basketball at 8 o'clock p.m. PAC, 11 o'clock Eastern, back here on LAS 365. See you folks tomorrow night. Bye-bye.